Welcome to the Social Impact Journal, the podcast where we talk to change makers driving social impact around the world. I am your host, Jack Farren, and this podcast is produced in collaboration with Rural Inclusion. The Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, adopted by the United Nations in 2015, are a universal call to action of 17 development goals set to be achieved by 2030. Today, I am talking with Luise Ammerschuber, the founder of Yes Impact, a consulting company based in Switzerland, working to support clients in implementing the SDGs. We will discuss the key elements of governance in the non-profit sector, international trends in impact investing, Luise's new projects in Africa, and her experience as a recent TEDx speaker. Make sure to hit follow or subscribe and check out our social media channels on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter at the Social Impact Journal. Let's get straight into it. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Social Impact Journal, and I'm delighted to be with Luise Ammerschuber today. Luise, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for the invitation today.
No problem. Maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the work that you're currently conducting.
Sure. So I'm the founder and director of Yes Impact. It's an international consulting company working with clients around the world to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. We also have our own projects currently in Uganda and working with also the newest technologies, seeing how we can have the largest impact on this planet. I'm also a speaker, a keynote author, a mentor on a lot of different platforms, and a big networker.
Great, and I think we'll get into Uganda a lot more later in the episode. It's one of my favorite countries, but maybe we can go to where it all started. And what was your motivation for entering into the international development sector?
Well, actually, my passion started super young. I was a very young teenager and started reading a lot of books about global challenges, about people in this world. I was fascinated by cultures since I was very young. And but I read everything about these cultures and a lot of their challenges, and I wanted to find solutions to that. So this is actually what got me more interested in international development, in international social impact world, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So when I was after my high school, I started working around the world and also studying international relations and really exploring pretty much every corner of our world and working for international organizations and NGOs and volunteering and trying to learn more of what is done already in this world to achieve some of these goals that we have regarding sustainability and social impact. And I was always very passionate about and very driven, and I found the field fascinating. So after my studies, I started working for an NGO to get even deeper into that. And I was a Salvation Army, International Salvation Army, an NGO active in 130 countries. And that job really allowed me to travel the world and look into all different aspects of development. My specialty was good governance and anti-corruption, which was a fascinating field in itself. But I could also see that the NGOs were working with the best interests, but also that we need more players to actually come to the table if we actually want to achieve change in this world. So I got very interested in new technologies such as blockchain or artificial intelligence. I was also very curious about the role that corporations, big companies could bring to the table, what they could bring to the table, and how they could work with the NGOs and government to actually achieve change in this world. And that was kind of the origin for me as well, to found my company, Yes Impact, just so that I would have a platform through which I could bring all these players to the table to see how we could achieve change in this world.
Thank you, Luise. That's a really fascinating story. And you mentioned around good governance within NGOs. So for our audience that are listening, that may be practitioners or founders of social enterprises, what are the key elements of good governance in a non-profit organization?
For me, I remember the first time I heard about good governance during my studies as a very young student, and I was like, what is that? And it took some time to figure it out, but it's actually Good governance really encompasses everything that we do as an organization, as a corporation, as a startup, as well in the social field. And it really covers every area of the organization. So it starts with the leadership being role models, how they act in the organization. It goes into human resources, finances, but also the way we execute the projects, and especially how we work with those that we want to benefit from our work, with our clients or our beneficiaries. So good governance is really something that, it entails the principles of accountability, of transparency, of fighting corruption and mismanagement in this world, and something that really everyone in an organization carries, starting from the top leadership down to the interns, and everyone's driving that in an organization.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. And towards the end of your last answer, you mentioned around setting up your own organization, Yes Impact,
Yes.
to bring key players to the table. So what exactly do you do at Yes Impact?
So Yes Impact started out as a consulting company, first working with government and with NGOs to make sure that really effective development projects take place. But the specialty of Yes Impact is social business and impact investing, and really bringing in new technologies as well. So bringing all these different players to the table. And the first projects we started were first in Nigeria, working with microcredits, and then in Uganda, where we now have a lot of different projects, and it's going really well. And there's a lot of international interest in that as well. And where we're mainly working with entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs and their communities, in enhancing their life standards and making sure that social businesses can also help a lot of people in their countries.
Thank you. And what drew you to Nigeria and Uganda? Uganda is one of my favorite countries. In our last episode, we had Nonso on the podcast, who is the co-founder of Soso Care in Nigeria as well. So what drew you to those two countries?
Amazing. It was absolutely random, actually. Nigeria was an Instagram contact, and in Uganda, it was a guy I had met on LinkedIn who happened to work on very similar topics like me. So a lot of working with entrepreneurs, with youth, also women empowerment. And we started talking, and we saw that we had a lot of the same interests regarding projects. And Uganda is an absolutely beautiful country, very green. So, and also socioeconomically very interesting to start these projects in. And they have a huge population that is not financially included. So that was a great country to start in. And we started with village saving and loan associations there. So basically an alternative to microcredits, where the community gathers in groups every week, but they get the funds from within the group. So they save money together, and they also advise each other on what businesses to start, and very effective and a really sustainable solution to financial inclusion, to starting entrepreneurship. And yeah, that's basically what drew me to Uganda.
Amazing. So Yes Impact was started. You had an Instagram contact in Nigeria who was, I presumably, running a microfinance institution or working with a microfinance institution. And then
it was actually a cake business.
A cake business? It
was a cake business. Yeah, it was a cake business. Wow. I stumbled on Instagram, and I was fascinated by how beautiful her cakes were. She lived in the countryside, and back then she made about $50 a month in income, and she asked for a loan, a small loan. And I had asked her, do you need charity or a loan? And she said, no, I want a loan, not charity, because of my honor, basically, because I have a bigger feeling of responsibility. And within a very short time, the microcredit that I gave her actually made her business explode positively, and she had massive income coming in, and she started teaching others as well of how to do these cakes, and it was really inspiring to see. So that got me really interested in wanting to do more in this regard.
Amazing. And then you moved to Uganda and have all of those fabulous projects. So you mentioned around the use of blockchain and artificial intelligence. So how exactly are those technologies being used in the projects that you are running with Yes Impact?
So for blockchain, I started collaborating with a friend who's a blockchain expert because I was very curious how this new technology could be applied to the social impact sector. Most people, they know about crypto, they know about Bitcoin and things like that, but they have no idea what actual application examples could be. And a challenge that we had in Uganda, and that's a general problem of microcredits as well, is that we could not get the information from the village saving and loan associations directly. So they would every group would write in a book, but me sitting in Switzerland, I had no access to that. So what we started was a very simple blockchain-based project that worked with a blockchain-based app. It was a Danish provider that we were working with. And the people in the community, they used very simple phones with the app, and they could put in the information about their savings, their loans, all of that. And it was saved on the blockchain, which meant that me from Switzerland, I could access the information anytime. So super helpful, made our projects very transparent. Even if we had donors involved, which we're planning for the future, or investors, they could easily access any information on the groups or the status of their loans very easily. So blockchain is very interesting in that field, financial inclusion, microcredits. I just published a paper about it as well for the Crypto Valley Association about that topic, and it already had a lot of international interest. So even the day after the paper came out, I had meetings with governments and huge microcredit funds, and I think there's lots of potential there. And similarly, we're exploring how artificial intelligence could be employed more for the social impact sector. So I'm really looking forward to establish some projects there in the future. I'll keep you updated about it.
For sure. Thank you. So blockchain is being used to digitize the record keeping and increase transparency of those saving groups. So without technology, how are those groups currently keeping their records?
In the past, the way they kept their records was literally in books. So you have a low financial literacy rate, you have low general literacy rates, only a few people in the groups could read and write. They would write in these books, but we had the problem that one of the books allegedly got eaten by a pig. So that was a bit dramatic, and which is what caused the whole story of looking for new technologies that we could employ for this to help us better with these projects. Yeah.
And I guess there was no backup records.
And nope, absolutely no backup records. Yeah. So now we have a parallel system. So they still keep the books because they feel comfortable with that. And we have the blockchain-based app, which, by the way, is not very costly. So people overestimate how much it costs, but costs are very low actually on that because it's just technology app-based.
For sure. So one of the other areas that you're working in impact investing within Yes Impact. What are the current global trends that you're seeing in impact investing around social impact?
So the trends I observe at the moment is that in the past, impact investing has been very high level. So it would be professional investors that would invest anything from quarter of a million and up to many millions and even billions. But now the situation that you have is that more and more retail investors, so people that some of them even just want to spend want to invest like 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 into impact projects, but there's massive demand for that. So a lot of the investment platforms and retail investors are now looking for opportunities. And on the other hand, we have excellent social businesses, great initiatives that we would like to connect them with. So as I wrote in the blockchain paper, there's quite some interesting examples there as well of how you can use that technology to match the investors with the social businesses. But yeah, we're definitely looking into how we can collect these funds as well, how we can match them best, how we can do the impact measurement as well to really make sure that it's not just greenwashing, but real impact that people can invest in. But there I definitely see a huge trend, like the interest of retail investors in this space and not just big investments.
Understood. Thank you so much. So going on to a topic which I'm really interested and excited to talk about is that I understand you are a frequent keynote speaker and a TEDx speaker for 2022. So for first-time social entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs coming up that may need to speak at pitches or at conferences, what advice can you share about public speaking?
Thank you very much for your question. I think for me, I was not a natural speaker at birth, so I was very shy as a kid. So I grew into it. Even at university, I was still a bit shy about speaking. But practice makes the kings and the queens. So for me, it's just about getting out there, pitch yourself as often as possible, and also tell your life story. What gets people motivated is the passion that you share, right? Not just a stiff story, but tell them what you like about that. What got you into that? What's the story behind it? And then make it as practical as possible. I see a lot of speakers that are throwing around big buzzwords, but with no real context behind it. So make things practical, building your own stories, and think about what could be interesting for your audience as well. What could motivate them for your topic, and put that in. And I think as long as you make speeches a bit interactive and really show your passion, they're very, very effective. And otherwise, if you're shy, just get into it. Like, do a small speech somewhere, even if you just pitch to your friends first, or you go to a conference and you pitch to a few people there. And then dare to go higher and higher, because you have no idea how much potential is in those speeches of being on stage, how much awareness it can give people around you. And my favorite part about it is it allows you to inspire so many others. So I had keynote speeches where a year later somebody contacts me on LinkedIn, or I meet somebody at a dinner event and they tell me, wow, I saw your speech a year ago and now I founded a social impact project, or I got engaged with an organization that does something. And that's amazing. Like, you overcoming your fear and getting on stage can mean that somebody else can find inspiration in you. And I think that is so beautiful and a great chance for your business as well.
For sure. You mentioned around making those speeches interactive. Is there any examples or past speeches that you can share where you're able to do that, and some success stories?
I love getting the audience up or engaged with each other, or just make them laugh. I mean, engaging the audience can be as simple as them nodding hectically or laughing at your jokes or something like that. But I definitely prefer an interactive speech where your audience, you can see they're laughing, they're engaged, they're thinking about what you said, they're asking themselves questions. It's so much more fun than just a stiff speech where they have to listen completely silently to you. Yeah.
Brilliant. No, I think even for myself, at the very start, making speeches, even to a small group of people, was so challenging. But with practice, the confidence definitely does come. But definitely, I'm still an amateur in that field of public speaking at conferences. So looking ahead to this year, 2023, what are your key goals for Yes Impact?
For Yes Impact, it's definitely scaling the projects that we have already. For example, in Uganda, I see how efficient they are. I see how much interest there is in them. And I want to get the players together around the world to implement them, both more large scale in Uganda, as well as in other parts of the world. And similarly with other social businesses, social impact initiatives that I know. I want to make sure that what has been tested and found good in one country can be adapted and scaled to other countries. So it's definitely one of my focuses for this year. And then also I'm very engaged in the female founders and investors scene. And I see massive potential there, and I see beautiful movement, and I definitely want to push that further, which I think we're doing amazingly already, to make sure that female founders, because they're often underfunded, although they're often overperforming compared to others, they still don't get a lot of funding. So we definitely want to close that gap, and we're contributing a lot to that. And otherwise, I really want to, continue working with clients all over the world and let my company grow and the impact. And I'm really looking forward to that this year.
For sure. Amazing. So your work around the female founders and investors scene, is that centered in Africa or also in Europe?
It's both. It's actually both. And I love seeing the parallels, because it's funny when I speak to entrepreneurs here in Germany or in Switzerland, and then I go to Uganda, the wording they use is very similar. So They will tell me they need capital, they need network, they need community, and they need visibility, which is exactly the pillars that we work with in Europe as well. So I love seeing the parallels, and also this year I definitely want to bring together entrepreneurs from the African continent to Europe and the other way around, connect those two more. I think there's so much to learn from one another, and people love engaging. I've done a few events where I connected the two continents already, and it was always great fun. And yeah, for female founders and investors, definitely working both in Germany, Switzerland, as well as in African countries and around the world, not really limited to one zone.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the topic of visibility, and from what you told me, your first project in Nigeria came through Instagram, and your projects in Uganda came through LinkedIn. So it's clear that you're really focusing on using social media to find new partners and new clients. So is there any tips or advice that you could share with a social entrepreneur about how to use social media to increase visibility?
I think most of all, be visible. Most people are so inactive on this platform, and visibility can mean anything from using social media to doing speeches to pitching yourself when you're in a crowd, even if it's just a dinner party, to writing articles about what you do. But definitely become visible. And I think for social media, just be consistent, start doing it. You don't have to be super world famous, but you have a beautiful initiative and social impact. The world deserves to hear about it, really. And by you sharing, you can inspire others, and more beautiful initiatives might develop. Or you find an investor or a partner that will scale your social impact to other countries, and then you've helped so much more people. I think there's only beautiful things that can come from more visibility, using social media for that. And another tip for social media is be specific. So find your niche, what you want to talk about, and you can still talk about some other things, but focus on that niche, and yeah, and become popular, become famous in that regard. I think that works really well. Yeah.
But a fun question before we finish. On the topic of Uganda, I know that you've traveled there before and you have a lot of focus there. So what's your favorite thing about Uganda, away from the projects, and maybe an interesting travel story that you had?
That's easy. The Rolex. I'm obsessed with the food. They have these things. Do you know what a Rolex is? So
The
Rolex is basically just means rolled eggs. It has nothing to do with the watch, but it's a dish that's made of eggs and tomatoes and chapati, because they have a huge Indian food, a huge part of the food culture is Indian as well. And I was so obsessed with these things that I had to have them at least once or twice a day, and I still miss them now. And I tried to make it at home, but I cannot get it to the same quality. Yes.
I can imagine. Yeah, I everywhere you see the street stalls, especially in the rural villages as well. When I first heard the word Rolex, I was so confused because they were talking about Rolex for 5,000 shillings or 2,000 shillings. But I had to find out what it meant. Before we finish, a question I asked to all of my guests, Luise, if you had your own social impact journal and you could write one page to give an advice to a social entrepreneur starting out on their journey, what one piece of advice would you give to them?
Build a very strong circle around you, a yes circle, I call it. I just gave a TEDx talk about it. Your empowerment and support circle. So from the very get-go, make sure you're not alone. Get a network of your friends, business partners, people you might find at conferences, at LinkedIn, it doesn't matter, but build a strong circle around you of people who know what your vision is and who can help you. And helping doesn't mean they have to work with you every day, but they generally look out for you, because that's what happened in my life. I've always been very people passionate and build a huge network around me. And I'm very blessed with people who will pitch me in a room full of strangers when I'm not even around, in a different country, and suddenly amazing opportunities come up for me. And I would advise any young entrepreneur or older entrepreneur to do exactly the same. Make sure people know about your vision and look out for the people around you the same they look out for you, and build a strong network around you, your yes circle. It will help you go really far and reach your dreams.
Thank you, Louise. So the yes circle is the solution. So how can our audience reach out to you? Are you active on, I know, LinkedIn, Instagram? Do you have a Twitter handle?
You will definitely find me on LinkedIn, Luise Ammerschuber. That's my main social media. You'll also find me on my website, yes-impact, yes with double S, and on Instagram as well. So feel free to reach out. Always happy to connect and to grow the Yes Circle.
For sure. We'll share all of your social media handles in the show notes, as well as your the link to your blockchain paper, which I think is very, very interesting, and also the recent TEDx talk around the Yes Circle. I think that's something I need to watch as well. So we'll include all of those in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Jack. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you for being on the Social Impact Journal.
It was wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you.